classic encounter, Ed Bradley and Eric Clapton.
People were writing graffiti, Clapton is God.
Yeah. I was disgusted and pleased at the same time.
The reclusive rock and roll legend surprisingly open about his demons.
Were you ever suicidal?
You know, almost on a nightly basis.
Raw and revealing about his years of abusing drugs and alcohol. And the reason he quit.
You know my name if I saw you in heaven.
You were very close to your son. You loved him a lot.
Hey, you would have loved him too.
Never before seen moments about how the music saved him after the tragic death of his 4-year-old son.
What I did was when the emotions started to surface, I played them. And I thank God that music was there for me then, because that could have been a very dangerous point.
There'll be no more tears in heaven.
I'm Lara Logan. Welcome to Classic 60 Minutes. When it comes to playing guitar, one of the all-time greats is Eric Clapton. The legendary rock star is the only 3-time member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and his iconic songs have earned him millions through the decades. But when Ed Bradley met Clapton for a rare interview in 1999, the reclusive guitarist wanted to talk more about how he'd handled the adversity in his life than the success, and there was plenty of adversity. But first, they talked about his rise to fame.
Your first band that you joined was what?
Yeah, which was called the Roosters.
And from there you went to?
Casey Jones and the Engineers. And then the Yardbirds.
You went to John Mayall's group.
The Blues Breakers, yeah.
All of these great names in rock and roll history. Huh?
She's a witch of trouble in electric blue, in her own man.
By 1966, Clapton had hooked up with Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker to form a band called Cream. It was a huge international success.
Strange brew, killing what's inside of you.
At this point, you were being recognized as the greatest player of the blues guitar in Britain. People were writing graffiti, Clapton is God.
Yeah.
When you saw that, what'd you think?
I was disgusted and pleased at the same time. I am an egomaniac with an inferiority complex. So I like the attention, and I don't like the attention.
But the more attention, the more success, the more he retreated into the world of drugs and alcohol.
I couldn't get through a day without doing something to alter my consciousness.
And it started with heroin, the addiction.
It started with sugar, Ed.
Sugar?
Oh, yeah. When I was 5, 6 years old, I was cramming sugar down my throat as fast as I could get it down. Sweets, you know, sugar on bread and butter. I became addicted to sugar because it changed the way I felt.
And as the years passed, Clapton would do more and more to change the way he felt.
The first time I got drunk, I got lost. I went to a jazz festival in the country, and I woke up 2 days later, and the thing was over. My friends had gone. I had crapped myself. I had puked all over myself, and I had no money. And I thought, what happened here? I had a hell of a time, and I thought, I can't wait to do this again.
You thought you had a hell of a time.
That's the difference in me and somebody who doesn't qualify as an addict.
When did you know that it had you?
I think I knew for quite a long time. But that thing about denial, the ability to lie to ourselves as human beings, was very strong in me. So I'd just shove that information.
Were you lonely then?
Oh, yeah. I think I've had loneliness play a part in my life all the way through.
The roots of that loneliness can be traced back to the small English village of Ripley where Clapton grew up. His mother was only 16 and unmarried when her son was born.
And at that time, a child born out of wedlock was really a scandal in a small village like that.
Pretty shameful, yeah.
Clapton would never meet his father. When he was less than a year old, his mother left him with his grandparents, who he grew up believing were his parents. Clapton wouldn't learn the truth until he was 9, when his mother returned for a visit.
I made initially a plea to her to be accepted as her son, and she said, I think in a great deal of pain, perhaps we ought to leave it as it is. And then I got angry. I really didn't know what the hell was going on. I had no idea of the good intentions in this. It just seemed to me that everyone had been lying.
How did it impact you?
So I was doing well at school, and suddenly I went to the bottom of the class. What I did was I found an alternative system of existence.
And for Clapton, part of that was developing a love for music, specifically the black music of America's Mississippi Delta, the blues.
Before you accuse me, take a look at yourself. Before you accuse me, take a look at yourself.
I saw in the blues an uplifting essence, which a lot of people don't really quite get. What for me is very important, which is that it's about dignity, self-respect, and having fun, or being able to laugh at our plight and you take the mickey out of it. And so it was there was a redemptive quality in that music, which wasn't existent in anything else around.
But where did you hear the blues in Ripley?
On the radio, and to me it sounded like they were in a fantasy land. I mean, to me, see, for you, perhaps, Ed, the plantations and the cotton fields would have been a place of abject misery and hardship. For me, it was paradise. I wanted to be. I couldn't think of anything I'd rather be doing than picking cotton and hearing that music all around me.
That was a fantasy.
It was. But, it worked. And it was so primal, the way I responded to that I just bonded immediately and began that journey.
How old were you when you got your first guitar?
13. I got my grandmother to buy it on what we call the Never Never, which is the hire purchase system.
What's the
You
Never
put
Never?
no money down. Well, money down. It's like money. You put a deposit down and then you pay for this thing over like a 5-year period.
Long period of time.
Yeah.
Clapton taught himself to play by listening to records.
My favorite one was The Best of Muddy Waters. And I remember playing along with it, having this guitar, not plugged in because I didn't have an amplifier, and making the shape of, the same shape as Muddy on a song called Honeybee, where I could hit it and it sounded exactly like the record. It sounded like I was in stereo with the record. And that was it. I'd cracked it then. I cracked it. I knew I could play.
When we return, Eric Clapton brutally honest about his alcohol and drug abuse and the story behind his biggest hit.
I don't know if I was capable of knowing what love was then. I was obsessed with this woman.
I fell in love with you. Turn the whole world upside down.
In this classic 60 Minutes, Eric Clapton's candid conversation with Ed Bradley continues. By the late 1960s, Clapton had already created many rock and roll classics, and he'd already played with some of the most talented musicians of his generation. But his biggest hits were ahead of him. His band Cream became an international sensation. They were the first to feature instrumentals, and Clapton's guitar solos became famous. By the end of the decade, Clapton seemed to be everywhere, even playing guitar with the Beatles on the White Album. But as Clapton told Bradley, during those high times, he was just that, high.
Once I lived the life of a millionaire. Spent all my money, didn't have any care. Took all my friends out for a mighty good time. We bought bootleg liquor, champagne and wine.
I started drinking as soon as I could lie about my age and get into a pub. And then it was speed. It got into the heavy stuff in my 20s, but I'd already been fooling around for a long time by then.
You just snorted. You never injected.
I never IV'd, no.
But you did a lot every day.
Yeah.
For how long?
3 years.
But you got rid of heroin, but you still had...
I didn't get rid of anything. I stopped taking heroin, but I immediately started drinking.
In the later stages, what was a day like for you? I mean...
I would wake up and look out the window, and I didn't know whether it was morning or late afternoon, and if it was dark, whether it was night, evening, or early, you know, I didn't know in the end. And sometimes I didn't even know where I was. Even though I woke up at home, I wouldn't know where I was.
How long would a bottle of vodka last?
Half a day.
Half a day?
Yeah.
You're drinking a couple bottles a day?
2 bottles a day. And then sometimes, you know, I would go out, or if someone managed to get me into a social situation, I'd drink on top of that.
Were you ever suicidal?
Yes, frequently. So, you know, almost on a nightly basis.
By the early 1970s, Clapton was performing on his own. He had also fallen in love with Pattie Boyd, the wife of his good friend, the Beatle, George Harrison.
This took place over a period of years, and I think he kind of knew. And they had stopped really living together. And I put myself in the position of being her savior. And I was full of all kinds of romantic nonsense.
It was Boyd who decided to leave Harrison and marry Clapton. And it was for her that Clapton wrote one of his biggest hits, Layla.
What do you do when you get lonely? Someone's waiting by your side. You've been running hard and much too long. It was just your foolish ride. You got me on my knees.
Pattie Boyd was described as the great love of your life. True?
I don't know, Ed. I don't know, because I don't know if I was capable of knowing what love was then. I was obsessed with this woman. So that's why I said I don't know if I loved her, because as a practicing drunk, which I was then, I just wanted something very badly.
What brought an end to it?
I think recovery for me, stopping drinking and realizing that I couldn't live the old life. In fact, you know, when I first stopped drinking, I kind of experienced a long period of impotency, which was pretty scary. And, you know, all it was that I hadn't performed any kind of sex act with a woman sober in my life. Never. It had never happened without some kind of stimulant. So you take that away, and it just didn't work.
Was there a low point, a point where you said, okay, that's it, there won't be a next drink?
Yeah.
Tell me what that was.
I was an avid fisherman, and that was one area where I felt I had some expertise and still harbored a little bit of self-respect. And I remember going fishing one morning, and on the other side of the river there were 2 fishermen who were acknowledged experts. And it was very important for me to make a good impression to these guys. So I started to set up my equipment. At some point, I lost my balance, and I fell over and I broke one of the rods in half. And something in me just died, because these guys on the other bank looked away. It embarrassed them. And that was the last little piece of dignity and self-respect I had going for me was taken away. And I had to gather up this stuff and put it back in the truck. And I think I was pretty near to tears if I wasn't actually crying. And I drove home, and I picked up the phone, and I called someone, and I said, I've had enough. And that was it. And I thought, what have I done? What the hell have I done? I've let the cat out of the bag. Because for years up until then, I had said, I'm fine.
So Clapton went into treatment, but was soon drinking again. It was during the relapse that he had an affair with Italian actress Laurie Del Santo. She would become the mother of Clapton's only son, Connor.
And when he was born, I was drinking. And he was really the chief reason that I went back to treatment. Because I really did love this boy. And I thought, I know he's like a little baby, but he can see me and he can see what I'm doing, and I'm tired of this. So, because I didn't have that much love for myself, he was the chief reason I went back into treatment.
You were very close to your son. You loved him a lot.
You would have loved him too.
It was for Connor that Clapton finally quit for good and vowed to be the kind of father he never had. But that was not to be. In March of '91, Clapton was in New York to visit Connor, who was living in the city with his mother. The phone rang in his hotel room.
And his mother was hysterical. She was hardly able to make sense. But she said he was dead.
He had accidentally fallen 49 floors from the window of his mother's apartment.
And I remember putting the phone down and calmly walking from my hotel to that place as if nothing had happened. And I walked past the street, and this is a terrible thing of shame for me, which I'll never, ever, perhaps, recover from. And seeing a crowd of people and a paramedic van, and knowing that he was there, and walking by. And I'll punish myself forever about why didn't I run? Why didn't I go to see him? And the truth is I couldn't. I was so frightened. And that's tough.
When we return, Eric Clapton talks about why he shared his sorrows with Ed Bradley and how he came to write the song for Connor.
I've always quite enjoyed going into that place of emotion with writing. It's like a purging experience.
If I saw you in heaven, would it be the same?
Eric Clapton is perhaps the greatest guitar player in the world, but his addiction to drugs and alcohol was also world-class. After decades of abuse, he says he became sober so he could be a good father for his son Connor. As this classic 60 Minutes continues, Clapton tells Ed Bradley how writing Tears in Heaven helped him after his son died. And here, in a never-before-seen moment from their 1999 interview, they discuss whether Clapton ever thought about returning to drugs or alcohol.
Were you tempted at all? Did you come close when your son died?
No, it was so overwhelming. I didn't have time to think about drinking. I went into shock. In a way, I became an emotional blank for a little while. A drink only really comes up around extreme emotions. What I did was when the emotions started to surface, I played them. And I thank God that music was there for me then, because that could have been a very dangerous point.
The music helped you out of it?
Yeah, I think so.
Tears in Heaven came out of that.
Yeah.
Was it a difficult song to write?
No, because I've always quite enjoyed going into that place of emotion with writing. It's a very, very, it's like a purging experience.
Tears in Heaven and the CD Unplugged would win Clapton 6 Grammy Awards in 1993.
There'll be no more tears in heaven.
You know, the greatest thing that I have is being awake for my life and being able to participate and having no more dark secrets inside which damage me. And that I've got through staying sober.
Clapton has been sober for almost 13 years now, and today spends much of his time in the Caribbean on the island of Antigua.
Eric, you feel that you're a loner now?
Yeah, I think I am. I'd rather not be. I mean, I like being in relationships. I have a lot of good relationships, friends, you know, but I don't have an intimate relationship at the moment, and I would like that, but I'm kind of getting almost too old for it.
You're never too old. Huh?
Well, you know, let's say set. Just, I like my own company, and for me to give that up, to share my time, I'd have to be pretty well obsessed with someone.
You don't do a lot of interviews, do you?
I don't know.
Why did you decide to do this now, knowing that I'm going to be intrusive?
Because I'm involved in something that needs to be spoken about, that is actually bigger than me. It's this treatment center that I'm trying to bring to people's awareness.
Mm-hmm. You'll take us there.
I will.
It almost looks like a hotel.
It's the idea. Lull everyone into a false sense of security.
To date, Clapton has spent almost $7 million on the project, a drug and alcohol treatment center called Crossroads.
You built all of this from scratch, yeah?
Yeah.
I mean, there was nothing here.
There was nothing here.
And Clapton's investment in the center is more than financial. Crossroads has personal importance to him, he says, because of how far he's come.
You survived a complicated childhood, drug addiction, alcohol addiction, the loss of your son. How have you come through all of this and managed to remain sane and remain whole?
I think the process of letting it go, of acknowledging that I'm not the master. And it ain't about what I want. It's about what I can give.
Now he wants to give people who can't afford to pay for a stay at the Crossroads a chance to use the rehab center.
If you're a local person, Caribbean, not necessarily from Antigua, but from another island, and you don't have any money, you can come here and get treatment.
A third of the beds will be set aside for them, and to pay for their care, he put on a benefit concert this summer at Madison Square Garden.
Sailing down behind the sun, waiting for my prince to come, praying for healing rain to restore my soul again. Just a toll ride.
He raised over $5 million by auctioning off more than 100 of his guitars.
At $450,000. Anyone else? It is charity, all the way. At $450,000. Sold.
In 1974, someone asked you what you'd like to be doing 10 years from now, and you said, I'd like to be alive.
Yeah, still true. Still true. I'd like to be sober too, because that's one isn't really possible without the other.
Soon after his interview, Eric Clapton found a new love. In 2001, he married Malia McInerney. She was 25 and he was 56. They now have 3 daughters together. Clapton continued to tour and continued to raise millions of dollars for his Crossroads Center. He's helped to build a halfway house in Antigua and to buy an additional treatment facility in Florida. And in 2007, he came out with a new book, Clapton, the Autobiography, brutally honest about his public triumphs and private torments. I'm Lara Logan. Join us next time for another episode of Classic 60 Minutes.
Did you have a nickname?
No.
Were you ever called the Looney?
The Looney.
Yeah.
There was a group of us at school that called ourselves the Loonies.
Yeah.
Well, that was our little club who didn't want to play sports, who didn't like anything. And we called ourselves the Loonies. Yeah. How did you know about that?
I did my homework, man. I'm an investigative reporter.
That's cool.